It was supposed to be the perfect summer. The shimmering blue water, the laughter echoing off the wooden dock, the scent of pine drifting through the crisp morning air. It was everything I had dreamed of. But perfection, I learned, can dissolve faster than sunlight on ripples. Hi, I'm Amelia, and welcome to Amelia Voice, where real stories unfold with every word. This one? It's about how my own family kicked me out of the lake house, without realizing the entire property was mine. It started like a dream, one I didn't know would twist into something darkly satisfying. My parents had invited everyone for a family reconnection week, and I, like the gullible daughter desperate for acceptance, said yes. My brother, his new fiancé, my aunt with her perpetual smirk, even my cousins who always found new ways to remind me that I was the quiet one, they all arrived with expensive coolers and louder opinions. I arrived with a duffel bag and a nervous smile. The house stood proud as ever, its weathered white paint glowing against the lake's reflection. It had been my grandfather's pride, his sanctuary, and the one place I thought still held a trace of unconditional love. But that illusion shattered the moment my mother greeted me with that polished smile she reserves for people she's already judged. "You actually came," she said, handing me a towel like it was a favor. The week began with small cuts, the ones that sting more than they bleed. My brother bragging about his promotion while sneering, "Still doing those little online things?" My aunt's hushed tone at dinner, asking if I'd ever grow out of that whole voice recording hobby. They didn't even pretend to care. My father, ever the diplomat, stayed quiet, pretending the tension was just nostalgia. But behind their laughter, I could feel it. I didn't belong. On the third night, after a dinner where every sentence I spoke seemed to vanish into polite silence, my mother made the announcement. "We've decided to make some changes around here," she said, swirling her wine like she was giving a TED Talk. "The house needs a more responsible caretaker, someone who actually appreciates family history." Her gaze sliced through me like glass. My brother grinned, that smug little smirk he'd perfected in childhood. "I'll take care of it, Mom," he said. "I'll make sure the property's in good hands." My fork froze midair. I asked, "What do you mean by that?" And that's when she said it, so calmly it almost sounded rehearsed. "We think it's best if you don't stay here anymore, Amelia. You've got your own life to live, right? This place isn't really for your kind of lifestyle. My kind of lifestyle." The words echoed venomous and cold. I laughed, a sound that didn't belong to me. "You're kicking me out?" My brother leaned back, satisfied. "Come on, sis. Don't make it dramatic. It's just a house. Just a house. The one my grandfather had built with his bare hands. The one I spent every childhood summer exploring like a treasure map. The one he told me on his deathbed was, for the one who still listens." That was his phrase, cryptic, like most of his wisdom. He was the only one who ever believed in my voice work, who told me stories had power. I didn't understand what he meant until that night. I packed my things quietly, each zipper in fold a whisper of betrayal. They stood on the porch, pretending to be sorry, waving as if I were leaving for vacation. My brother even had the nerve to shout, "Don't worry, we'll take good care of it." The moment my car reached the end of the gravel road, I stopped. My hands trembled, not from sadness but from a rising electric clarity. I opened my phone and pulled up the documents I had filed months ago, the ones no one in my family bothered to read when Grandpa's estate went through probate. My lawyer had been surprised back then, too. "He really left everything to you," she'd said, flipping through the papers. "The house, the land, the dock, it's all in your name." I hadn't understood why he did it. Until now, I took a deep breath, looking back at the outline of the house against the fading sunset. They thought they'd humiliated me. They thought I was gone for good, but they didn't know I held every key, every signature, every right to the soil beneath their feet. My family had kicked me out of my own home. And that night, as the lake glimmered like liquid gold, I decided something that would change everything. I was going to let them enjoy their little victory, for now. Because revenge, I realized, isn't loud. It's quiet, like the lapping of water against a dock before the storm rolls in. I drove away that night with my heart thundering in my chest, the gravel crunching beneath my tires like a countdown. I didn't go far, just a few miles down the road to a small cabin rental overlooking the same lake, where the reflection of that house still shimmered in the distance. The same house they had kicked me out of, unaware that every board, every window, and every inch of that land bore my name on paper. I sat there on the porch, my laptop glowing faintly in the darkness, and opened the property file again. My grandfather's handwriting was still scanned across the deed, to Amelia, who listens. It was almost poetic. He must have known how this would unfold. My family had treated the lake house like a trophy, something to flaunt, something to fight over. But to him, it had always been a lesson, a test of who truly valued what he built. I realized then that he hadn't just left me property. He had left me a choice. And I chose not to be silent anymore. Over the next few days, I stayed in that cabin, watching from afar. My brother hosted barbecues. My mother rearranged the furniture. My aunt paraded around like she owned the place. They had no idea I was watching, recording even, as part of what I planned to share with my followers on Amelia Voice. But this wasn't just content. It was documentation, evidence of arrogance. Each laugh, each careless remark about finally having control, fueled a growing storm inside me. On the 5th morning, I drove into town and visited the local records office. The clerk, an older man with reading glasses hanging from his neck, barely looked up as I slid the deed across the counter. "I just need to confirm ownership," I said, my voice steady. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the document, then looked up at me with a faint smile. "You're Amelia, right? This is definitely yours. No dispute, no liens, nothing. Clean and clear." The words hit like thunder. Mine, every square inch. I walked out with a copy of the official ownership certificate in my hand, sunlight hitting the embossed seal like a promise. My next stop was the locksmith. I told him I needed new locks installed on my property, immediately. He didn't question it. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees that evening, I was standing at the end of that familiar gravel road again. The laughter from the house carried through the air, carefree and cruel. I parked quietly, stepped out, and inhaled deeply. The scent of pine and smoke filled my lungs. It felt like home again, but this time I was coming back on my terms. I didn't knock. I didn't announce myself. I simply waited on the porch until the noise inside faded into silence and the door opened. My brother stood there, beer in hand, looking startled. "Amelia?" he said, his smirk faltering. "You're back already?" I met his eyes and smiled, the same smile he'd given me days ago. "Actually, I never left," I said. "But you did. You all did." He frowned, confused, glancing behind me as if expecting a camera crew. "What are you talking about?" "This house," I said softly, "is mine." I held up the deed, the paper illuminated by the porch light like scripture. His face drained of color. "What? Grandpa left it to me. You remember him, right? The man you ignored while he was alive?" My mother appeared behind him, her expression shifting from irritation to disbelief. "That's impossible," she snapped. "We handled the estate." "You skimmed it," I interrupted. "You never read the fine print. Maybe you should have." The silence was exquisite, the kind that stretches and trembles before shattering. My aunt tried to step forward, her voice trembling. "Amelia, darling, let's be reasonable." I raised a hand. Reasonable would have been not throwing me out of my own home. My brother's jaw tightened. "You can't just—" "I can," I said. "And I will." I reached into my bag and pulled out the new set of keys. "Starting tonight, the locks are being changed. You have until sunrise to pack up and leave." Their reactions were a symphony of chaos. My mother sputtering about family loyalty, my aunt pretending to faint, my brother cursing under his breath. But I didn't flinch. I'd spent years being the quiet one, the background voice, the afterthought. Now I was the echo that wouldn't fade. As they scrambled to argue, I turned toward the lake, the moonlight shimmering on the water like applause. "You wanted control," I said without looking back. "Now you get to control how fast you leave." My mother's voice cracked. "Amelia, please, think about what you're doing." I smiled. eyes fixed on the reflection of the stars. I am. For the first time in my life, and when the locksmith's van pulled into the driveway minutes later, their faces turned ghostly pale. I didn't need to say another word. The click of new locks echoed through the still night, sealing more than just doors. It sealed a chapter. They had no idea that I wasn't finished yet. The real revenge was only beginning, and I intended to make them feel every ounce of the dismissal they'd once handed me. By morning, the house was mine again, quiet, hollow, and heavy with the echoes of what had just happened. I stood in the living room surrounded by the aftermath of my family's departure. Half-empty wine glasses, a forgotten cardigan draped over the couch, and a trail of resentment lingering in the air like smoke. Outside, the lake shimmered beneath the golden sunrise, serene and deceptive, as if it hadn't just witnessed a war. I closed my eyes and let the silence sink in. This place, once filled with laughter and betrayal, was finally mine. Not just on paper, but in power. Yet even in victory, a strange chill crept into my spine. They would come back. I knew them too well. My family never accepted defeat. They twisted it, repackaged it, and tried again with sharper smiles. But this time I was ready. I decided to document everything, the eviction, their words, my emotions. I sat by the window, set up my microphone, and hit record. "This is Amelia from Amelia Voice," I began, my tone calm and deliberate. "Today, I want to tell you what happens when the people who say they love you try to take what's yours. When they forget that sometimes the quiet one is the one holding the power." The story flowed like wildfire. I described every detail: the dinner, the humiliation, the shock on their faces when I revealed the deed. My followers had always known me for emotional storytelling, but this was different. This was raw. Within hours of uploading, the episode began to spread. Comments, shares, messages flooding in from strangers who felt seen, who whispered their own stories of betrayal and poetic justice. I didn't name my family, but I didn't need to. The emotion was universal. People loved it. But as my platform grew overnight, my family's calls started. First my brother, his voice dripping with forced concern. "You've made your point, Amelia. Now take the video down." I hung up. Then my mother, her tone switching from guilt to manipulation in under a minute. "You're humiliating us. Think about your reputation." I laughed quietly. For once, I am. The next day, I received an email, an official one, from a family lawyer I hadn't heard from since Grandpa's will was processed. They were requesting clarification about the ownership of the property, implying that my claim could be re-examined. It was almost cute how desperate they were. I forwarded it to my own attorney, who replied with one line, "Let them try." That night, the wind picked up across the lake. I could hear the waves hitting the dock like a heartbeat. I stepped outside, barefoot on the old wood, and looked across the dark water. The stars shimmered faintly above, and for the first time, I didn't feel small beneath them. I felt infinite, but my peace was short-lived. A car engine rumbled in the distance. Headlights flashed through the trees. I froze, heart pounding. The clock read 2:13 a.m. Only one family would be bold, or foolish, enough to show up uninvited after being thrown out. The vehicle stopped at the base of the driveway. I could make out silhouettes, 3 of them. My brother, my aunt, and my mother. Figures from a nightmare returning for one last attempt at control. I didn't hide. I stood on the porch as they climbed out, their faces tight with anger. My mother spoke first, her voice sharp as a blade. "Amelia, this is ridiculous. We need to talk." "No," I said. "You need to listen." My brother stepped forward, fists clenched. "You think you can just ruin us publicly?" "That podcast wasn't about you," I interrupted. "Unless your guilt decided it was." His jaw twitched. My aunt tried the sympathy route, her tone dripping with false calm. "Sweetheart, we all made mistakes. But you can't shut your family out." I tilted my head. "You mean the same family that kicked me out of my own house?" The air thickened. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft whisper of the wind through the pines. Finally, my mother sighed, her mask cracking. "We need this place, Amelia. Your brother's business. He invested in plans, renovations. Plans? I repeated. You mean plans for my property? My voice rose slightly, just enough to carry over the sound of the waves. You all thought I'd stay quiet. You counted on it. But Grandpa didn't give this house to you for a reason. I stepped closer, holding her gaze. He gave it to the one who listens, and I finally understand why. Because the rest of you never did. My mother's expression faltered, guilt flickering beneath her anger. But my brother wasn't done. You can't win this, Amelia. You're outnumbered. I smiled, calm and certain. Maybe, but I'm not outsmarted. From my pocket, I pulled my phone and pressed play. Their voices filled the air. The recordings I'd captured days ago when they laughed about taking the house, mocking me. My mother's gasp sliced through the night. You recorded us? You taught me to protect myself, I said simply. Consider it a lesson learned. Their confidence broke like glass. My aunt muttered something about lawyers and privacy, but I didn't care. I'd seen what fear looked like on their faces now. I turned toward the house and opened the door. You should go, I said softly. Before I decide to post this one too. They hesitated, but one by one they backed away. Angry, defeated, powerless. I watched their car disappear into the trees, the red taillights vanishing like embers. When the silence returned, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It wasn't over, not yet, but the balance had shifted forever. I looked at the lake, the reflection of the stars rippling in the water, and whispered to the night. They thought they could take my home. They never realized. I am the storm that protects it. The next morning arrived cloaked in mist, the kind that makes the world look half forgotten and half born anew. The lake was still, as if it too were holding its breath. I made coffee and stood at the window, watching the fog drift across the dock. Every inch of this place felt alive again, charged with quiet power. But deep down, I knew calm was never permanent where my family was involved. Their retreat in the night hadn't been surrender, it was strategy. The kind they had perfected through years of manipulation and control. I expected retaliation, and I was right. By noon, my phone buzzed nonstop with messages. Not from them this time, but from my followers. The podcast episode, my story, had gone viral overnight. Millions of plays, endless comments, people rallying behind me. They called it the Lake House Revenge, the ultimate justice story, Amelia's storm. My voice, once ignored at family dinners, had become a weapon of truth. And they hated it. A new email came in from a real estate firm. Apparently, my brother had tried to list the property online. The audacity made me laugh. He must have thought I wouldn't find out, that his old connections would bypass ownership checks. I forwarded the message to my lawyer with a single note. Handle it. Within hours, the listing was gone. That same evening, I decided to visit town again. The locals had heard rumors, of course. In small communities, stories spread faster than wildfire. As I stepped into the old cafe by the docks, a few heads turned. The waitress, a kind older woman who used to serve my grandfather, smiled softly. He'd be proud, you know, she said, handing me my drink. That house always needed someone with a backbone. I smiled, warmth blooming in my chest. Took me long enough to find it, I said. But peace was short-lived. As I walked back to my car, a familiar voice stopped me cold. You think this is over? My brother. He leaned against his truck, arms crossed, wearing that same infuriating smirk. I didn't flinch. I think you should be grateful I haven't pressed charges, I said. Breaking and entering attempted fraud. Want me to list more? His smile tightened. You really think the world's on your side because of some sob story online? I stepped closer, calm but razor sharp. Not a sob story, a truth. And people love the truth when it finally bites back. He exhaled slowly, trying to regain his swagger. You can't keep us out forever. Mom's already talking to a judge. She says you're unstable. I laughed then, a cold, amused sound that made him blink. Unstable? I tilted my head. Funny, coming from the family that kicked out the rightful owner and threw a party in her living room. His silence told me everything. I leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. You're done, Nathan. The world doesn't pity bullies anymore, they expose them. Then I got in my car and left him standing there, red-faced and powerless. When I got home, I sat down and recorded another episode. Sometimes, I said into the microphone, my tone steady and magnetic, revenge isn't about destruction. It's about revelation. You don't need to ruin people who wronged you. Just show the world who they are, and they'll do the rest. The episode exploded even faster than the first. My subscriber count doubled. People sent letters, messages, even gifts, each one thanking me for speaking the words they couldn't. My mother, predictably, tried one last time to manipulate the narrative. She posted a long, teary social media video claiming the whole ordeal was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But her followers were now my audience too, and they saw through it instantly. Comments flooded in defending me, calling her out, sharing their own stories of family betrayal. The tide had turned completely. Days passed, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. I repaired the dock, painted the shutters, and restored the cabin exactly the way my grandfather left it. Simple, quiet, and strong. Each nail I hammered in was a reminder that this home wasn't just a house. It was my inheritance of resilience. But then came the letter. Official envelope, bold black lettering, summons to appear in court. My mother and brother were suing me for emotional distress and unfair defamation. I stared at it for a long moment, then smiled slowly. They were making their final move, and I was ready for it. I called my lawyer immediately. "We'll win," she said confidently. "They don't have a case. And given the recordings, the documentation, your grandfather's will, honestly, it'll be poetic." "Poetic's my favorite genre," I replied. The hearing was set for the following week, right here in the county courthouse overlooking the same lake. When I walked in that day, dressed in calm confidence, my family was already there, sitting together like a fading empire. My mother looked brittle beneath her pearls, my brother tense, my aunt pretending to be shocked by everything. They expected the old Amelia, the one who would crumble under pressure, apologize for existing. But that Amelia was gone. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't falter. I told the court exactly what happened. Every manipulation, every insult, every attempt to erase me. I presented the deed, the audio recordings, the emails. The truth spoke louder than I ever could. My family's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, a social media performer exploiting private matters. But even the judge frowned at that. When the verdict came, it was clean and swift. Case dismissed. The house was confirmed as legally and permanently mine. My mother gasped, my brother slammed his hand on the table, and my aunt whispered something about ungrateful children. I didn't celebrate. I just stood, nodded respectfully, and walked out into the sun. The lake sparkled through the courthouse windows like it was applauding. That night, back at the lake house, I recorded the final episode of the saga. "This isn't a revenge story," I said softly. "It's a rebirth story. Sometimes you have to lose your place in the family to find your place in the world. They tried to take my home, but what they really gave me was my voice. And I intend to use it." I ended the recording there, letting silence fill the space, because some moments are too powerful to dilute with words. As the moon rose over the water, I stepped outside, barefoot again, and smiled. The wind carried whispers through the trees, and for the first time they didn't sound like ghosts. They sounded like freedom.